Broadcasting from the campus of Salisbury University, this is WSDL Ocean City, NPR News Talk 90.7. Putting Delmarva first.
The Wallops Flight Facility is set for another rocket launch next week as it celebrates its 70th year in operation, and many on Virginia's Eastern Shore are counting on it to give the local economy a major boost in the years to come. Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. Wallops Flight Facility has seen a series of successes, especially with the commercial development of the rocket industry. But last year, it did suffer a setback when a resupply mission to the International Space Station had to be aborted and exploded at the launch pad. Local business leaders say that the regional economy is getting a lift from all the rocket activity. With a recent survey that found the NASA flight facility generated more than $800 million in economic activity last year, $248 million alone in Virginia. And Wallops has had some big boosters in Washington, D.C., including Maryland's senior Senator Barbara Mikulski. This morning we'll take a look at the significance of Wallops, particularly for the region. We have in our studio at this moment Peter Bale. He is chair of the Wallops Island Regional Alliance. And welcome to the program.
Hey, good morning, Don. Thanks for having me.
The place has been around for 70 years, and as a matter of fact, I did a story a few years ago talking to some local business folks, talking about how they thought that there would be some kind of takeoff in terms of the economic activity. Been a lot of hopes along the way. Some of them been dashed. Some of them say, gee, it hasn't been. It wasn't what we wanted it to be. Where do you think we are in terms of the economic activity being generated by Wallops?
So, as you noted, I head up the Wallops Island Regional Alliance, and we're about 250 members of local business owners and operators on the shore, and we meet quarterly down near the facility to talk to the leadership within the NASA organization and the U.S. Navy. Both the U.S. Navy and NASA are spending a lot of money on infrastructure on the island to support upcoming missions in areas of national defense, with the areas such as the International Space Station supply, and then venturing in new ground for the area in unmanned aircraft systems. So drones, operating on and around the Wallops Island area, as part of the FAA test site selection that the Wallops team was a part of for the 6 test sites chosen for unmanned systems across the country. So the economic impact is tremendous that we're seeing in the area, not only just from the rocket side, but again from the Department of Defense with the Navy support going on in the area, and then local businesses and attractions. The small town of Chincoteague has gained a new hotel and a new restaurant. So we're seeing a lot of economic growth around the supporting areas as well, just not in the Wallops Island infrastructure area.
Now, as a matter of fact, I noted that your organization actually changed its name. It used to be the Eastern Shore Defense Alliance. And something said that, basically, it was you were quoted as saying that basically you've outgrown that and that maybe it was a little tough to leave behind. Tell me a little bit about that realization that maybe this is more than just about defense.
Yeah, so it was a decision that we'd been pondering for a couple of years. I've been the chairman now for 3.5 years of the organisation, and we've grown dramatically. Just in the appetite is insatiable for folks to want to find out what's happening in the area. So we still maintain that one of our main priorities is the defence side and the protection of the federal assets in the area. So we've worked closely with the community, with the leaders, within all the areas, and we are very much committed to that. So we met as a board around 2 months ago, and we quickly decided that we needed to be looking at what our new name with our new organisation moving forward was, and how that needed to reflect our membership. So we had a lot of folks that were probably not as interested because of the Defence Alliance tag, thought it was a defence centric organisation, but very much different from that in what we've changed into, or what we've morphed into, which is a regional alliance, bringing everyone together.
Now, one of the things I noticed was that this recent study that took place, we're talking about $808 million in terms of the economic activity. That's sort of double what, as I understand it, was just 4 years ago. What do you think has been the reason why you get this sort of dramatic increase?
So we've seen a massive capital investment by the state of Virginia, with the support from Maryland on infrastructure and support functions at Wallops. We have a new UAV runway, the Wallops Research Park. We've seen an increase in activity with the Virginia Spaceport, with their establishment of the facility. So that brings a lot of infrastructure support to the area. The original study was done by ESDA, which was the 260 odd million. That didn't account for some of the U.S. Navy activities that have continued to grow, and the new impact study does take into account a lot of the Navy's activities as well, which has really grown in the area. So we've seen that transition, but with the commercialisation of the space port, and then with the increased activity with the NASA facility, with their involvement, and not only in just rockets, and I don't want to talk to NASA's business, but they've had a lot of increase in earth science and other activities from the facility as well. So they all collate and roll on together, and it's like a snowball, although it's a terrible analogy for this time of week, but they continue to roll on, and we continue to grow, and it's an exciting phase for the shore at this time.
We're joined by Bill Robel, I believe it is, Director of NASA's Wallops Flight Facility. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, you're celebrating your 70th sort of anniversary of the creation of it. Take us back a little bit. Give us a little bit of sense of history, because obviously 70 years ago, NASA didn't exist, I don't believe.
It did not.
How did you guys start out in terms of of being an installation, as it were, and then how did you transition into this spaceport?
Yeah, so back in the early days, right, it was the NACA, which was the National Advisory Council on Aeronautics, which was the precursor to NASA. Langley was their first installation down in the Hampton Roads area. And so we were kind of a detachment from there. We were kind of a test site. We were the test site. And back in those days, where you're trying to get a handle on high-speed aerodynamic flight, they used sounding rockets that we're still using today. I mean, obviously different variants of it, but back then they were putting different aerodynamic shapes on the front end, and they would fly them out over the water and collect the data. And what's even more interesting is you think back in that period of time, 70 years ago, you didn't have the telemetry systems, the radio systems that you have today. So literally the instrumentation was tied in by cables on big spools. And so as these rockets would go flying, you'd be collecting data right up until your cable ran out, and then your test was over. So, I mean, that's kind of the genesis of some of those early tests that were done. And then since then, right, they've gotten a lot better analytical techniques. They've got the supersonic and high-speed wind tunnels, and so that part of things has gone away. But sounding rockets are still used. We fly them 20-plus times a year all over the world, but basically now it's to collect science. And it's also to try out new instruments, new things that scientists have. They want to get a little bit of time in space, try them out, find out what works, what doesn't, and then they can kind of bring them back, reformulate them, and try and fly them again. And eventually these become NASA's bigger flagship missions, many, many years down the road.
Now, obviously, I got to ask you about it. They had the mission, the International Space Station mission, which, of course, was aborted basically almost virtually on launch, as it were. Made a frog famous, as I understand it, which could be seen in front of the flash. How significant was that to the development of Wallops, and does that set you back? How does that fit into everything else that you're doing?
I mean, it's been a big draw, right? It's so visible here on the eastern seaboard, with the population that kind of exists. So visibility is up into Maine and New York, and even into Ohio. And then certainly if you think about what goes on in the D.C. area, and then New York and some of those areas. So the viewing public gets to see something that they don't necessarily have to travel very far to see, and so that part of it I think has really been a big draw. I think it's kind of reinvigorated things. It's been a big boost I think for us on the Eastern Shore.
And this failure, how does that set you back? I mean, obviously there was some damage to the launch pad.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's some obviously disappointment that comes with that, but unfortunately, it's the reality of aerospace. We're playing with chemicals. We're pumping them up to really high pressures. We're burning them, and sometimes they don't work out as we hope. But what I'd say at this point is we're in the rebuilding process. Facilities on NASA have been turned around. In fact, we've got with the Missile Defense Agency, we've got a tracking exercise coming up with them soon, and so our facilities are kind of back online relative to that. I know that the state of Virginia has been working diligently on the pad. The plan right now is to get that into a position where they can turn it back over to Orbital Sciences or Orbital ATK now at this point, probably in the fall time frame. They're looking for a hot fire, much like we did the first time through with the new engine set in the early part of next year, and then actually fly by the spring.
So, Peter, when you saw, and we all saw this launch that sort of then exploded on just I think minutes or seconds after it launched. When you saw that, what was your reaction? I mean, obviously disappointment, but what sense did you get about, this is not a good thing for all your efforts to kind of develop the entire area? What were you thinking when you saw that?
So from an aviation background, just reiterating what Bill says, in the aviation community, we say stuff happens. So we were all disappointed, but I think the main thing was the network and support function of the community rallied together very quickly behind NASA, behind the Mid-Atlantic or the regional spaceport to validate and verify everyone was okay. I think the main interest when we first all saw it was the community spirit of making sure that the community was safe, that personnel were safe, and that I think the implementation plan that Bill and his team put together was a valid strategy that led everyone away from harm's way, and the community was safe, and everyone really rallied together afterwards to make sure, well, okay, we understand this is a mishap. Let's move forward and let's look to the future, because I think we only got a snippet of the first couple of launches of just what the capability and what the current context for the shore really brings to this area. So, again, stuff happens. We look forward in our path forward. We don't look in the rear vision mirror because that's when we run into trees. So we continue to look forward and the growth on the shore. And as the regional alliance, again, we understand this industry and the different parts of it, and we're here to support locally to make sure that we move forward, grow up, and be strong in this space industry.
Now, how significant is for you, Peter, is the Wallops Research Park? I guess there's an $8 million groundbreaking. A lot of folks coming in, different, not just simply related to rocket launches, but it seems like there's a lot more companies interested in locating here. What's been the development of that?
So the development's gone extremely well. The manager for the park, Julie Wheatley, has really pushed forward with creating an ideal opportunity. The taxiway gives access directly to the facility, so we see a lot of opportunities, here on the shore with that research park. Now, the interesting thing about the research park is that the particular costs associated with developing and being a part of a new and growing park are not what we're seeing in the Baltimore or Beltway region. We're seeing the opportunity to attract a lot of people at a very reasonable rate to moving into the area with what's going on. So the research park for small companies, ideal opportunity for large companies that are used to paying Beltway prices. I think they'll be very surprised on just what's available, and looking to grow the park significantly as it ties into the pad coming back online, and then Virginia's also invested heavily in a $5.6 million project for the island facility that'll be a dedicated UAV runway. So a drone runway which allows operations to the north end of the island away from the rocket activity. So it gives the facility another pivot point, another business opportunity, so that we're not mired into all of the eggs in one basket with rockets. It diversifies into unmanned systems, and the interesting thing with unmanned systems is airspace and where you fly. So the research park dovetails into that nicely, giving them access to to a facility, a world-class facility where they can do testing and really develop their products before taking them out to market in a safe, controlled, and regulated environment.
I want to turn to something, Peter, because one of the questions I have is how the area is developing in terms of its infrastructure. Because as you have development like this, obviously you have to have an increasing amount of infrastructure with roads, that kind of thing. And this is and this area, the Chincoteague and Wallops and so on, it's not. We're not talking about Baltimore. We're talking about a place that has been basically rural in nature for a long time. How has the community begun to deal with the increasing need for infrastructure?
So, if we look at the Research Alliance, or the Regional Alliance, sorry, as we look at the growth of that, 4 years ago we had a membership of around 50. Here we are at 250, and we're moving north rapidly with that. We're seeing an appetite from the northern Delmarva down through to Richmond, up into DC. People are very interested in what's happening here on the shore for that growth. As far as infrastructure goes, VDOT has commenced road widening programs to support the rocket infrastructure moving in and out of the area. We've seen more emphasis on access to Chincoteague, with a new bridge, things like that. They probably aren't retrospective to what's going on, but in hindsight have been wonderful decisions to make the island more accessible. Hotel rates, for example, are at peak, even in this off-season at 90+%. Room occupancy is way up there. So you've seen private investment folks move into the area and take on large capital projects by themselves, to be in the game for what's coming downrange in the next 10 years. So there's investment from the state, there's investment privately. And I think that you see a community that is really starting to understand the importance of what's going on Wallops. That is just not a key part of sustainability through the high times, which is the Chincoteague summer and the activity that goes on down there with the ponies and all the attractions that happen with the beach. You're seeing now a sustainable industry through the colder and winter times with a diversified work base. So I think the community is grabbing it and taking ownership of it and moving forward in a responsible way.
Bill, same question to you is how has the community adjusted to the expansion of all this activity? I mean, you folks particularly, you have been more and more involved with commercial development in terms of rocketry and so on. And I want to get into that in a moment, but in terms of expanding the number of shots that you include, the fact you have people who do come down to watch it, and obviously then you need the infrastructure around Wallops to deal with as a support for a lot of the rocketry, particularly commercial rocketry that's going on.
Yeah. So I'd say along the lines of what Peter said, the community has been very supportive. In fact, there's at least been a couple of folks that have mentioned to me, again, kind of in the Eastern Shore vernacular, which is a rising tide floats all boats, Bill. So kind of along those lines is that I think it's helped kind of bring everything up. It's like Peter said, it's another attraction to the area. Just like the beaches and the pony swims and some of the other things that go on there. It's just another way, I think, that brings more people in. And I think for us, the benefit is, even for like the open house that we'll have in June, right? It's an opportunity for, say, young students to kind of come in and see, hey, what goes on here? And the neat thing, I think, with Wallops is there's a variety of things. whether it be in the aircraft side of things, as Peter was talking about with the unmanned systems as well, the sounding rockets, the scientific ballooning, the range operations. And I think it's a great way for youngsters to come in, take a look at what goes on. It might pique something. I mean, it's that kind of a thing, I think, that got me started in the whole thing many, many years ago.
So turning to the commercialization, because I know that there were a lot of folks who really emphasize, particularly in the area, that they think that the commercial side of rocketry is where it's at in terms of generating the usage for Wallops, as well as generating the economic activity around it as associated with Wallops. How successful has it been? Because some folks a few years ago, when I was talking to people, they were a little disappointed because it really wasn't taking off as fast as they wanted to. What's your assessment about how that trajectory has been in terms of whether or not it's taken off slower than you thought it would be? I mean, how do you and what do you think is going to happen now in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say just in general, right? It's a really tough business, and as we found out, it can be pretty unforgiving at times. But for instance, in this particular case, had the state not made the investment, the state's not made the investment kind of in the pad facilities down there, had Orbital Sciences, now Orbital ATK, not made the investment in the launch vehicle, and then kind of couple that in with what the federal investment has been, it kind of takes everybody to, and we're all kind of sharing it. And so it may grow slow at times, but the fact that it's even here now, it wouldn't have existed if it was all reliant on the federal government to basically sponsor it all. It wouldn't have happened. So I think there's been a big draw as a result of what's going on. I mean, and it's not just what goes on here. Florida's benefiting from it as well with the SpaceX groups. You got Virgin Galactic that's out there trying to do the commercial suborbital flights. So I think there's a lot more to it. It may take a little while to get there because it is fundamentally just very hard to do and very unforgiving, as we've seen.
In terms of, by the way, how there's a competition between you guys, I guess, and SpaceX, I guess, who's being launched somewhere else in terms of resupply to the International Space Station. I guess one is the accident that occurred. Has that given anybody any pause as to whether or not one program will be maybe, for instance, favored over another? How are you seeing that competition developing?
Yeah, I mean, so the discussions that I've listened to have been more along the lines of, well, you don't want to necessarily put all your eggs in one basket. You want to have multiple ways of getting there, and in fact, that is what we've got for space station resupply. The Russians obviously are part of it. You've got the Europeans that are a part of it, the Japanese that are a part of it, and then you've got a couple companies in the United States. And so it kind of takes all that to keep that supported well.
Do you think both programs will just simply go on, or do you think one will beat out the other?
Well, and who's to say that there might not even be a third party?
One, that's true.
Yep.
That's true. So, by the way, you did touch on this a moment ago, which is the students, because I know I actually have been down to Wallops and when you had some students.
Yeah.
How do they react to the space, the idea of space exploration? I mean, when I was growing up, I suspect as you as well, watching the moon landing and that sort of thing, we heard actually on Morning Edition some music that's actually set to some of the exploration that was going on. How excited do you think people are in terms of exploration, particularly people who are younger? I mean, do they have that same magic, or is it just?
No, I think it's well. In fact, the one thing I'd say is there's a program that came to us here a couple of years ago from Virginia Aerospace Scholars, and so they have been doing it for a number of years down at Langley. They brought a variant of that program up to Wallops, and again, kind of patterned it into the things that we're into, which is the sounding rocket side of things. And so the first class, again, it's an online component, and then if you're selected, you can actually come down for a week-long period. And it was so wildly successful that they added a second class this last year. That one was so wildly successful that they're actually looking at, they'd like to even add more. So I'd say the sky's the limit on any of that kind of thing. There is a tremendous amount of interest out there. And what I like about it is it's kind of the exposure in a broad area. So even if it turns out it's not an aerospace career that some of these children would go into, it may be a science field of something else. It could be medicine, could be anything else. But I think it's a tickler, right? It's you put something away and later on it comes out and who knows where it'll take you.
So where do you see the space program going? I mean, obviously you're a piece of it, and I guess in the news recently there are 100 people now have been selected, and some of them may actually go to Mars, but they can't come back. I'm not sure what that's about, but nonetheless, where do you see space exploration going, and then obviously how you guys fit into it?
Well, I guess I'd say that as a species, right? We've always been we've always wanted to know what's on the other side, or what's out there. And I think it's kind of the way that the world kind of had expanded, right? Christopher Columbus and a lot of the early explorers, Magellan, et cetera, they set out to find new passageways, found new lands, et cetera. I think this is along the same lines. And that's obviously, I think, as technology kind of improves, we'll be able to go farther and farther and farther, whether it be robotically and then follow up with man. And I think that that's going to continue just because we've got that insatiable appetite for it.
Why do you think that? I mean, it seems to me, as I looked over the space program, that there's sort of a lag. I mean, they used initial enthusiasm. Obviously, it was the competition with the Soviet Union, and we landed on the moon and so on. Mm-hmm. And we have had the exploration of Mars and so. But there doesn't seem to be the kind of push that there was in that initial phase. That it seems to have lagged a little. I mean, do you detect that, and do you think that'll change at all?
Yeah, I think that. Again, I think things like what is taking place down here, just the visibility of it, is something a lot of people have never seen. A few years ago, people probably didn't even know that Wallops existed, but I'd say we're on the map now, and I think that brings with it, kind of a groundswell of enthusiasm. It'll make more people probably go into the field in the future. And so I think with that, it'll kind of spurn a whole next generation of things that'll take place. So my feeling is that, it's a roller coaster, right? It's like anything else. As the budget cycles improve, they can put a little bit more into aerospace. As they, maybe go the other way, they take a little bit out. And so that's the unfortunate realities of life, I think.
We've been speaking with Bill Robel. He's the director of NASA's Wallops Flight Facility. Also, Peter Bale. He's chair of the Wallops Island Regional Alliance, a sort of booster group for the local community, and we appreciate you guys stopping and talking to us.
Thanks very much. Appreciate the interest.
This has been Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush. Thanks for listening.
This has been Delmarva Today, a production of Delmarva Public Radio. Chris Rank produces and is our audio engineer. Don Rush is your host. For podcasts, visit our website, delmarvapublicradio.net, or subscribe to the Delmarva Today podcast in iTunes. Delmarva Today can now be seen on PAC 14. To view the schedule, visit the Daily Times or visit pac14.org.